Like to welcome everybody to day 2 of the Mountain Trade Network's ListX and SASTEX event. Just first off, quick reminder that yesterday's sessions, State of the Snow Sports Market, and the 4-season model forum panel discussion that I hosted are now available to view. You should have received an email this morning to click into those. So James Gamble from Ski Club Great Britain's State of the Snow Sports Market survey and the forum panel discussion on summer mountain tourism. So I hope you can catch up on those if you didn't see them live yesterday. And also a quick reminder that at 1:30 p.m. today, I'll be presenting the results of the summer survey, Summer in the Mountains survey, and that is really interesting and some great stuff in there that we found. And it's kind of the first one of those full surveys questioning skiers and snowboarders' habits about summer mountain holidays, whether they've been on summer mountain holidays or whether they plan to go on summer mountain holidays. But obviously this morning, I'd like to introduce Ian Martin, a founder of Ski Flight Free and presenter of the Ski Podcast. Ian's going to look at practical and achievable ways the snow sports industry can reduce its carbon footprint today and ensure skiing has a future as well. So this is the sustainability session this morning called Net Zero or Zero Snow. So Ian, take it away.
Thanks, Rob, for that introduction. And I enjoyed the panel that you put on yesterday as well, which I found very interesting.
Thank you.
And welcome to everyone who's joined us today. Rob did give me a bit of an introduction then. My name's Ian Martin. I am the presenter of the Ski Podcast, which hopefully I can get to change on my screen here. Why isn't that changing? There we go. Presenter of the Ski Podcast. But more pertinently, as Rob mentioned, I founded a lobbying campaign called Ski Flight Free in 2019, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. I'm trying to encourage people to look at alternative ways of getting on their ski holiday rather than flying, in the knowledge that flying represents 50 to 80% of the carbon footprint of any ski holiday. So you can significantly affect it by looking at alternative ways. But the point of this presentation today is really to try and share a few ideas of best practice that's going on within the industry already, and ways that individuals and organizations can make a difference and help us. So a little look at the kind of context of where we are at the moment. Hopefully, we're all aligned with the idea that a business as usual is no longer an option. Changes do need to be made if we're going to be able to progress to limit the increase in global temperatures to the IPCC target of 1.5 degrees. There was a report earlier this year, which I'm sure some of you, probably all of you, will have come across, which essentially was saying that this really is the last opportunity to do something, and that's for states, for organizations, and for individuals. And might not feel like it at the moment with the spring that we're enjoying so far, but last year, if you cast your minds back, was a significantly hot summer, the highest ever temperatures recorded in the UK, and indeed across much of Europe and the globe. And we're actually seeing some new high temperatures being set in different places on the planet at the moment. And that continued into the autumn, those warm temperatures. You will be mindful or remember that many of those events that were organised for the autumn in Europe, different World Cup races, were cancelled in Solden. I know Rob was out there. I listened to some of his interviews that he did. One of the days was cancelled because it was raining at a very high altitude in Zermatt. There wasn't enough snow to run that initial downhill race that they're going to do between Zermatt and Cervinia, and we very much hope that's going to happen this November. And although there was a little bit of snow in early December, unfortunately, images like this propagated across the what you might call the mainstream media, not wishing to sound too much like a Trump supporter there, the MSM. But these images were everywhere. And, you know, while it was possible in many places to ski and to have a really good time skiing at the time these photos were taken, the fact is that there was very little snow at low altitudes. And that is a consequence of the changes that we have been seeing. If we look at the data that is available, there's an evident trend, and the last few years have been extremely warm. And looking at Météo France, the influence that this increasing global temperature will have is going to shorten the length of the ski season. As it goes, Val Thorens closed on Monday with some fantastic snow. They could easily stay open longer, but we're looking at longer term trends, and Val Thorens has the advantage of being the highest ski resort in Europe. We're looking at our industry as a whole, because there is an existential risk to the ski industry across the board. And within the industry as well, we're thinking about the context of global warming. We know that the global temperature has been rising, but if you look at within Europe, how those countries and how the temperatures are changing in those countries, in the Alpine nations, we can also see that the temperature is rising even more than the global average. And part of this is to do with it's a circular effect. There's less snow and less ice to reflect the heat, and therefore temperatures are going up even more. And people or in terms of snow cover, actually, I picked this out of an article I read in the Times and the Sunday Times. It gives an indication. You need to look at the detail, but the summer side of things, the snow cover has been significantly less, and the end of season cover is less as well. It's a trend that we've been seeing for quite a long time. Sometimes people say to me, because I've been skiing for a long time, have you noticed any changes yourself? Well, it's very hard to be able to think back over seasons and be able to come up with any proof in your mind. But one thing that I do know is I first skied the Vallée Blanche in about 1982. And this photo is just a comparison of the Mer de Glace at the bottom of the Vallée Blanche in Chamonix between 1990 and 2021. And there is evidently an extreme change there. Another way of looking at it from a data point of view is that when I first did the Vallée Blanche back in the 80s, there was basically no walk, no walk to get back off the glacier to get yourself back to Montenvers. And as of 2019, there were 580 steps to be able to do exactly the same journey, and that's to do with the diminishing of the glacier. And so that is, a very simple way of being able to look at it from a personal view and to know how much change there has been. So I think what I'm trying to hopefully help people to understand is that the decisions that we're making today as individuals and organizations are going to be extremely significant, and they will influence whether depending how old you are listening to this presentation, your children or grandchildren might even see glaciers at all in Europe. And certainly it's beyond that. I mean, the effects of global warming will affect millions and potentially billions of people around the planet, but from perhaps a more selfish point of view, they affect the ability of people to enjoy this wonderful sport that we love and we've been able to enjoy, and that may not be possible. So there is an existential threat to skiing and to snow sports. Now, that's the sort of negative side of things. The positive side of things is that it is not too late to do something about it, and that change is possible. And what I'm interested in encouraging is what we can do as individuals. We're all working within the industry in this context today, and we have an opportunity to have a legacy and influence on that. What we're trying to move towards is net zero. The idea is we're going to reduce down the amount of carbon emissions that we're putting into the atmosphere as a species, humans, so that we can limit global warming. And you're probably aware that most countries have a target of net zero by around 2050. In China, I think it's 2080 or 2070 in India. But to be able to achieve that, we need to get emissions going down along these trends, which when you look at that graph, to be remarkably significant, although they have been going down a lot. But when you actually narrow it down, it comes down to what is a relatively small amount. And so a question to ask yourself will be, can you cut your carbon emissions by 6% per annum? Because if you could cut your carbon emissions by 6% per annum, which is what we need to do as a country, then we will be net zero by 2050. So that's quite a good target to have in mind. And it seems much more achievable, I think, to be able to look at it in these kind of terms than the much bigger picture. So, keep that in mind when I'm talking about some of the ideas and some of the possibilities of what we can do individually or as organizations. And I think I mentioned organizations. Picture here is probably what you think of a typical influencer. And maybe someone who's on Instagram or TikTok who's sharing videos for lots of people, but we are all influencers in everything that we do, particularly when we're in the industry. I get asked for advice from lots of people about where they should go on holiday and what they should do, etc. But I'm producing a podcast, I'm sending out tweets, and you are all in the same situation as this, whether you are a destination or a tour operator or a journalist. You're in a position where you are able to influence others. So you can change what you're doing on an individual basis, but you can also help change other people's behavior by giving them the information to make those decisions and the reasons why it's important. So to start off with, I wanted to look at 10 companies who have a great approach at the moment and who are already making changes now. And I thought I'd start off with Hotel Plan. Hotel Plan, I think, are really at the forefront of the actions that they've been taking. In the last few years, I was lucky enough to interview Prue Stone, who is their Director of Sustainability. Yes, Director of Sustainability on the Ski podcast last year, who was talking about a number of the measures that they've introduced. But earlier this year, earlier this year, they announced these two. You can see there's a blog post I wrote up for Ski Flight Free, which I've just put the summary in there. But climate partnerships, and what they're doing is actually, contributing for every guest who travels to these two partnerships, and so they're basically taking money off their top line to make a difference immediately. And part of this is a commercial decision, because it positions them as being a company who actually cares about the future, and that's why I'm promoting it and encouraging it. But part of it is because they understand as well that there is this existential issue at play. Alicats is a chalet company based in Morzine, who I've also featured on the podcast several times. I've spoken to Al Judge, and they are financially incentivizing their potential clients to travel with them by giving them discounts if they travel by train or if they choose to have vegetarian or vegan meals. Also, if they elect not to use the hot tub during their stay. And they also have lots of measures in terms of how they're organizing their business, in that they have an electric vehicle, they use organic composting, and they source as many of their food as they can locally. So they're really going out of their way to make a difference, and taking perhaps a bit off their bottom line by trying to reduce the overall emissions associated with their holidays. And this actually links in with the next thing, which is Montagne Verte, which some of you may know. It's an organization formed of different companies and players in Morzine. And again, they're financially incentivizing people. The Alpen Express is an offer that they have for anyone who's arriving by train. They're going to get a discount off lift passes, but they get a number of discounts around the resort as well. And I wish there were more resorts who were offering this. I think I'm correct in saying that La Rosière give people a discount on their lift pass as well. Les Arcs offer people a free trip on the funicular from Bourg Saint-Maurice up into resort if you have travelled by train. But more discounts for train arrivals will motivate more people financially to make that decision to travel by train. And it significantly makes a difference to emissions. Remember, we're all in this together. We need to bring down emissions by, let's say, 6% a year. If we can offer people financial incentives to do that, that's better for all of us, but it's also, excuse me, better for resorts as well, because there's a lot of people out there, lots of data has shown that the consumer is searching for more sustainable options, but there is this kind of say-do gap. Lots of people will say this, but they just need a little nudge to get them over the line. So offering financial discounts can make a significant difference. I also wanted to bring in Compagnie des Alpes, of which Travelski is a business within that. I'm pretty sure most people will be familiar with Travelski. They started the direct train from the UK to the Alps, and that in itself, if there are 5,000 people traveling every winter, is significant in bringing down the carbon costs. And one of the reasons it came back into play was because of the coordination and cooperation between all of the mairies and the local communes in the Tarentaise Valley, who understood the value to them of people traveling by train, not just because of taking cars off the road, for example, but because of the reduced emissions overall that were going to that would result from this. And that's been successfully reintroduced. I understand that from a tour operator point of view, the fact that Travelski only allow users, consumers, to book their own packages with Travelski makes you less likely to promote it. However, I very much hope that there might be some other charter trains out to the Alps in the future. I understand that's something that may be under discussion. And Compagnie des Alpes is a very large company that I've actually left my notes down the bottom there. They own 22 different ski resorts, responsible for 85 million skier days. And they have a net zero target of 2030, which is quite close. And they are making steps that are way beyond the 6% a year to reduce their emissions. The most significant decision they made in the last year was to convert all of their 130 snow groomers from the different resorts from diesel to HVO, which I think stands for hydrogenated vegetable oil, and that in itself reduced their emissions by around 83%, because many people think of going on a ski holiday and they think, oh, there's a carbon cost to do with running the lifts. In fact, that so many of the lifts are run on renewables anyway. The biggest carbon cost associated with running a ski resort is from those snow groomers themselves. So that decision to switch to HVO from diesel was extremely significant, and is part of the great work that Compagnie des Alpes is doing. Coolbus, someone who I often refer to in my presentations. On the right hand side, you can see one of their Tesla X's that they've been using in the Alps. They've carried passengers, or a transfer company who take people to the Tarentaise. They have covered over 700,000 kilometers with their electric vehicles. The point being, well, okay, people are still flying into the airport, and that is a significant cost, but at least they can bring down the carbon cost of the overall holiday. And this year, for the first time, they have added three of, on the left-hand side, you can see a picture of a Mercedes EQV, which is the most effective electric people carrier on the market. There's a blog post on Ski Flight Free about their experiences of this, but it worked really well for them this season. They worked out they actually had to take out a seat to allow for luggage to go in, but they are really working hard on ensuring that they can have zero emission transfers from the airport and around resorts. So you know, they're setting a great example there. Another thing that we've referred to in different presentations before is the real increase in pre-loved clothing, you might put it. We've heard from people like Rachel at EcoSki and Sally at Who Ski before. EcoSki have for several years now been offering rental clothing. Who Ski is a website where you can sell your clothing and buy clothing. I've sold a whole number of items through Who Ski. I went through my cupboards of ski jackets from years ago that I never use anymore, and ski pants, and even sold some ski boots through there as well, which is great because you're helping to keep this stuff in the circular economy. People, instead of buying new items which have emissions associated with them, they are, you know, buying something that is already exists. And remember, if we're thinking about that goal of reducing our emissions by 6% on a year-by-year basis, that can be achieved in lots of different ways. But what I noticed this season, which was really interesting to me, was that both John Lewis and Selfridges were offering and are offering ski wear as rental. And their rental departments are actually quite big. Now, I find this kind of interesting on the big picture there of the Selfridges one. 419, I think that is to rent those, well, that outfit, let's say. Probably not the outfit I would go for, but if that's what you want to go for, it's available on Selfridges as well. And I guess the point is that, you know, you can cover all ends of the market, and it is possible. You might know someone who loves to buy a new ski jacket and ski pants every year because they only wear them, you know, for one trip a year because that's what's fashionable at the time. But here's an opportunity for them as well to reduce their emissions, but still remain highly fashionable at the same time. So 6% is that figure that I have mentioned several times. 6% a year is what we need to be cutting our emissions by to be able to achieve the targets we've set. And the point of those targets is to limit the overall increase of global warming. So what can you do as individuals? Well, I mentioned that the travel out to resort is 50 to 80% of the carbon footprint. And so the simplest way that we can encourage people to still go skiing, but to reduce that overall footprint, is that we can use our influence to actively promote train travel, for example. Now, I mentioned Travel Ski Express. If you're a tour operator destination it doesn't go to, then probably you have no incentive to promote it. But if you're a journalist, you can certainly promote it. And on the left-hand side there, I have, it's a screen grab from Ski Flight Free again, a recent journey I did out to Verbier by train. I think that this is how I travel when I go to the Alps. I mean, I've probably traveled, you know, a dozen times in the last year out to Europe by train. And 11 of those times I went via Eurostar to Paris, and then Paris out to my next destination. And while not everyone is going to be taking that direct train, there's plenty of other ways to travel by train and get out to the Alps. It's not that complicated and it's not that expensive. It doesn't have to be that expensive. It's a bit like air travel in that respect. The longer you book in advance, the less expensive the ticket is. And in fact, there's a recent survey, which I will share by Twitter. I haven't quite got round to blogging it yet, from Which magazine, which establishes that train travel is actually cheaper than air travel in many cases. So I will remember to share that. But the point is, we need to let people know more about train travel and to demystify the elements such as changing trains in Paris. Really not that difficult. You know, I've got an excellent video about how you go about it on YouTube that's had thousands of views and one of the most satisfying videos that I've created. But actively promote train travel. If you're a tour operator, you know, you probably offer people a discount by traveling by car. And, you know, depends if you've got a charter flight or not, or maybe an independent company. But perhaps offer a higher discount for traveling by train if guests choose to travel by train. In the way that I mentioned before, that extra nudge, that extra financial incentive will make it easier. At a very minimum, on your website, you want to be making it very clear to people how they can travel by train, how they can go about it. If you have that blog post already on your website, then you should be adding it on there. And when you add it on there, I would suggest that you put in what the carbon cost of it is, which is quite easy to look up on Ski Flight Free. But essentially, it's around 16% of the carbon cost of flying if you travel by train. And in most cases, you can actually travel, or in a lot of cases, you can travel much closer to the resort than you can by flying. If you fly, you end up in Geneva or Innsbruck or wherever it might be, and then you need to get a transfer, possibly from Coolbus to the resort. But if you travel by train, in the case of Verbier, I caught the train all the way to the bottom of the resort in Le Chable. You know, in Switzerland is obviously very good for this, but you can go to Crans-Montana, for example, a resort that Rob knows very well, and catch a funicular up from the valley floor. You can get to Zermatt by train. But if you go to the Tarentaise, I mentioned before the funicular from Les Arcs, you can go straight up from there for free if you travel by train to Les Arcs. And, you know, I will be going out to Les Trois Vallées later this summer. You go to Moutier, it's just a short journey, half an hour up to Mirabel, slightly less than compared with the 2 hours or whatever it might be from the airport. So the point I'm trying to make here is you really need to give that information to people who are considering traveling to your destination or with you. Promote train travel. I guess I'm repeating myself here, but I want to underline the fact that if you're going to offer a discount for people who are traveling by train or electric vehicle, then that is going to incentivize them to do it. In terms of electric vehicles, I haven't covered it much in this presentation, but there's several case studies on the Ski Flight Free website of people who've traveled by electric vehicle, a couple by me. I interviewed recently Simon McIntyre from Igloo Ski in the most recent episode of the Ski Podcast, who drove out an electric vehicle to Val d'Isère in April, extremely successful trip. I would consider whether or not you can offer people a discount offer or offer them free charging, as was the case with Simon, where he got free charging at the Club Med in Val d'Isère at the destination. Anything that can help nudge people, help them make that switch and make that decision, but sharing information about it in the same way that I mentioned sharing information about train travel, getting people to understand that it is entirely possible is going to help and make that shift. And from an electric vehicle point of view, I mentioned that traveling by train was around 16% of the carbon cost of flying. If you're in an electric vehicle and you travel by Eurotunnel, and you recharge on most of the main chargers on the motorways, they are all powered by renewables, which means the carbon cost is negligible for your journey in terms of tailpipe emissions. You know, there's an embedded cost in the car itself. That's another question entirely. But it can be as low as 21 kilograms of CO2 equivalent for traveling to the Alps by electric vehicle, compared to 162 for flying, and that's in each direction. So it is huge, the difference traveling by electric vehicle. So can you offer your guests a discount for it, is a point I'm making. Think about that 6%. Can we overall reduce carbon emissions by 6% on a yearly basis? Another way of doing that is to demonstrate what the carbon cost of a holiday is. Explore, who aren't necessarily in the snow sports area, but every single holiday on their website, they include the carbon cost, the carbon footprint, in this case, of that holiday. If you were doing that on your website, then it is going to help make a difference. You're educating people. There will be some people who aren't concerned about it at all, but there will be other people who will choose that. And you see that the carbon footprint is being shown in lots of different booking engines. For example, I try and avoid taking flights if I can, but my mum lives in Australia. She's too old to fly. There's only one way of seeing it, and that's to fly to Australia. And when I booked my flights, and when I was looking around for my flights, I noticed that most of the booking engines these days will tell you what the carbon cost of that particular flight is, and depending on their route and the type of plane, etc., it can help you make that decision with the flights that you're taking as well. And we're seeing this more and more. Booking.com, for example, have labels for more sustainable hotels. So the more information that you can give your potential clients and customers at the booking point, the better it will be in terms of leading towards lower emission results. You can change your company vehicles to electric. That's fairly straightforward type of thing. I mean, my company is Skipedia, but I did buy our car through the company because from a tax point of view in the UK, there's a lot of advantages to that, as well as knowing that we have zero tailpipe emissions when we're driving around. Lots of resorts have done this, and that really is a fairly straightforward decision to start off with. Take the train for work trips instead of flying. If we're in the industry, we do find that we need to go back and forth between the UK and the Alps on a regular basis. And if you're doing it on a regular basis as a journalist or someone who is managing a company or representing a destination, you're going to be going back and forth a lot. And sometimes it's not possible, but taking the train for work trips instead of flying, if you're thinking about that 6% again, cutting your emissions by 6% on an annual basis, then if you normally go out, I don't know, half a dozen times, and you take the train once and you never did before, then you're probably going to achieve that 6% from that. It'd be much better if you could do it more often, but how about making it a policy within your company? From a work point of view, I personally find that I'm much more efficient in a day of traveling by train than I am in a day where I'm traveling when I'm flying. I can sit down and work. Eurostar, actually, the Wi-Fi isn't particularly good, but on SNCF and traveling out to Switzerland, the Lyra services, etc., the Wi-Fi is brilliant. And there's loads of space, and they've got plenty of charge ports, and I can have an effective day of working. And at the same time, I'm traveling towards my destination in a low carbon way. Consider, instead of, if you do have to have a work meeting virtually instead of in person. Some people will have appeared on the podcast. I don't know if you know how we do it, but we meet via video, so we can all see each other and get that side of things, but we just use the audio in that case. But you can evidently save a lot of emissions if you're not flying somewhere to meet someone face to face, and evidently that's what we're doing today. In this instance, I know that meeting people in person can't be replaced. I would never want to go back to those horrible times that we had during COVID, where we weren't able to see people face to face. But sometimes it's more efficient and certainly has a lower carbon cost to meet virtually instead of face to face. Some people won't like this, another thing I blogged about, but how about not offering private jets anymore or heli skiing? Hey, like I'll put my hand up. I've never been on a private jet, I don't think, but I have been heli skiing, in the past. But if you're a tour operator or a destination, obviously it's not available in some countries, but these are extremely carbon intensive activities, and potentially you could actually stop offering them. If you want to achieve a 6% cut in emissions, then that would probably be a very easy way of doing it. And in more detail than what I am discussing today, you can take a carbon literacy course, and you can get some of your staff to do a carbon literacy course. Protect Our Winters offer a really good one. They're available on a regular basis, and some of you might know eCollective, who've done some work with Hotel Plan. They also offer carbon literacy courses. It's a very simple and effective way to bring yourself up to date, or to bring your staff members up to date with some of the new ideas and a lot more detail than I can tackle things here. And give yourself a carbon audit as well, because if you want to reduce your emissions by 6%, you really need to know where your starting point is. You can do it intuitively. You can kind of think, well, I was taking this many flights and I'm going to cut it down to this many flights. But really, as a business, you're only having that starting point, knowing what your emissions are, and bringing them down steadily towards a target of net zero. And another thing that you can do, as if you're British, SBIT, guess some people are familiar with this, but seasonal businesses in travel. This is a really good organization which is about collective action and sharing ideas for tour operators within the UK. And when Brexit was going on, there was a lot of discussion about how the issues of recruitment were going to be resolved. But I think a lot of those conversations now are about this existential threat from climate change and how that can be tackled with. And I'm very optimistic, perhaps, that SBIT could be an organisation that would help to deliver another charter train out to the Alps. I mean, I'm really crossing my fingers on that one. If the collective will is there and the companies can work together, then that could be so significant in reducing carbon emissions from the British skiing public. We already know that flying has is the biggest proportion of emissions for a holiday. So what can we do to shift people to train? Well, maybe ideas that can come out of SBIT can affect that as well. And finally, this is, anyone can do this as an individual, is change your pension. If you haven't changed your pension yet, then this is a really good website, makemymoneymatter.co.uk, that you can have a look at, which will give you a lot of information about what your pension is invested in at the moment. And this is just something in general that I would recommend anyway, because perhaps you don't want to have your money invested in a fund that is invested in tobacco, for example, or arms dealing or something like this, ethically questionable issues. But more importantly than that, there is a really strong lobbying that can be done by withdrawing funds from carbon intensive businesses. And if you can rearrange your pension so it's invested in low carbon businesses, and those high carbon businesses will pay attention, because ultimately this is extremely important to them. How many people are investing in their company, what the demand is for their shares, and their share price overall. And while in the last kind of 18 months or so, I've thought, well, wouldn't it be wonderful to have dividends from some of the oil companies who've doubled their profits in the last year? Equally, it's important to make sure that something that you have a lot of influence over, your pension, is doing its bit. And in fact, if you change your pension, if you haven't done it already, and now to low carbon investments, you'll probably achieve that 6% that we're talking about straight away, because it has a really big effect, depending how long you've been saving for, etc. So I've covered a whole bunch of ideas for best practice there, that what's been done in the industry as well. It's really kind of a skim through of some of the ways that you, as an individual, as an influencer within the industry, can help us globally, overall, collectively, to achieve this drop on a year-on-year basis, to help us move towards net zero, limit global warming, and keep skiing continuing through the generations for everyone to come. So keep that 6% figure in mind, and together we can make a difference. So thank you for listening. I'll have a quick look at the Q&A. Right, so I see there's a question from Adam, He said, what are the main obstacles to chartering trains for tour operators? Is it a question of volume? And can collectives of operators or bigger operators overcome this? You probably need a tour operator to answer that question. I would say the main obstacle is probably cooperation. Historically, many years ago, I used to go out, or I went out on a snow train when I was at Bladen Lines, where different carriages were taken by different companies. It seems to me that would be possible. And really, I would see SBIT as being part of that opportunity for different companies to negotiate. Maybe a larger operator like Crystal, I would imagine, although I have no idea about their yields and things like this, that they would be a large enough company to put on their own train. But if anyone from Crystal is out there, they can chip in and tell us. Louise, thank you for your comment there. James Gambrel from the Ski Club has said the Ski Club would be up for a train share. Clearly there's demand given past numbers travelling on trains. Well, there you go. James is starting the conversation. I know that conversation is being had. Lots of people don't want to commit and say, oh yeah, it's definitely going to happen. But I think this would be so significant if we could introduce a second direct train service from the UK that would be available to operators and individuals as well. I mean, I've said personally to Travel Ski that I believe their policy of not selling individual seats is wrong. I think they should be selling individual seats, because it irks me to know that there are empty seats on these trains going out when there would be people who would buy them. It would be, in my opinion, it would be possible for them to just release a very small number of seats. And when they're booked, they're booked. But it would help generate additional demand. It would maximize the value from those trains. But a charter train run by different tour operators, etc., would be a really good idea. And I really hope that happens. I've got one other question there from Adam, a question on carbon offsetting. This is a really difficult area. In general, we don't want to offset, because offset means that carbon emissions are still created. And ultimately, if we're going to achieve the goals, we need to stop carbon emissions rather than simply offset them. Some emissions are unavoidable. I read a really interesting book recently. It's almost impossible to create concrete or make steel without carbon emissions, and therefore offsetting, maybe you can do carbon capture or something like that. You do need to do it. I'm flying to Australia. I can't see my mum physically without getting into a plane, so I'm going to offset that flight. What I would say is that when you do your offsetting, if you are doing offsetting, that you do the due diligence required to make sure that it is a scheme that is, let's say, genuine and credible. Oh, a couple of other questions. Oh, Steffi just says, thank you. Alison is a tour operator, Alison Wareham. We need trains that you can book for groups. Now, that is a really good point. A couple of people have asked me before about booking groups, and I know it's very difficult because you're having to deal with SNCF and you're dealing with Eurostar as well. So perhaps, Alison, it would be good for you to get involved with that SBIT conversation, which hopefully I haven't imagined is going on, but to bring that into play. And I think that's probably all the questions just now. Anyone else?
I think Adam, hi Ian. Adam's also asking about, does offsetting not cancel out the carbon emission?
Well, it is
net zero for a given action. It's just to follow up on that.
Yeah, net zero, but it isn't going to work. I think it's a mindset issue, perhaps more than anything else. People just think, oh, well, I can cancel out my emissions, and people don't have any incentive to reduce them. And depending how they're offsetting them, there's been significant research to show that a number of offsetting schemes are not reliable. There's a brilliant video by John Oliver, which I will remember to share on Twitter, which exposes just how non-credible some of them are.
And Don Winter is asking as well, it's possible to book, I think, is it possible to book a whole coach on the Eurostar? According to their website, not sure if it's ever been done.
Good question. I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I would guess that it probably is, because they want to sell and they must have group trips that go back and forth already. So yeah, I don't know the answer. Maybe Daniel might be the person who would know. Daniel for Carbon would be the person who would know who the contact is for that, but I don't know myself.
And then net zero predictions are: we can only absorb 10% of current global emissions with absorbing technology. Also,
yeah, for sure. I mean, he's talking about you know, a lot of nations and politicians are making assumptions about the type of technology that's going to be available and just hanging their hat on that and hoping that it's going to work. Things like carbon capture is, you know, unproven and potentially very expensive. The only real solution is to reduce emissions.
Okay. Just going back to Alison's question, because I think also, obviously, for groups, they're a school tour operator, and Alison's making a point that you can get to France relatively easily by train right now, but Austria and Italy, for example, are not so easy. So that's something that I guess as an industry we also need to look at if we're going to be traveling to the Alps and some people's favorite alpine destinations. And to be able to get there by train. Just on that point, I heard recently in that there's possibly, or there's certainly talk of a direct train from London to Basel. And I don't know if you've heard of that one, but I know there's obviously challenges on the immigration side, especially it would be in Basel railway station, where they would have to then somehow manage the immigration, I guess, going out of Switzerland back into the UK. So they would have to do a little bit like what they do in Paris and London, where they have some kind of you know, passport control, I'm guessing. Do you think there's solutions for that? Obviously, either political solutions where we can solve some of the immigration issues we've had since Brexit, or whether there's just sort of simple solutions, like we can, as soon as someone's wrapped up in that train journey from Basel to London, passports can be checked on the train, for example. That's, you know,
I mean,
sort
that
of common sense.
I hadn't heard that. And while I would be delighted if that was the case, it would surprise me a lot, given that Eurostar is the only operator who would be able to run that particular route at the moment. Eurostar's current policy is to not go beyond what they would call the major, you know, destinations, which currently is, you know, Amsterdam, Paris, Brussels, Bruges, etc. But evidently it's possible. You know, it doesn't seem like necessarily a route that lots of people would go for, but it is, in terms of how you deal with passports, they'd have to work that out with Switzerland. Well, the last time I went out by train, when I went to Verbier, I actually had forgotten that I took the train from Paris, and I ended up going through passport control in, can't remember what, must have been Geneva, where I arrived. I didn't even remember there was a separate section that I had to go through, where I just kind of waved my passport. So there was like a customs there. So it must be possible to do it within railway stations. But I would be delighted if that happened, but I'm not entirely sure that it will yet. What would be much more significant would be if another operator was allowed to operate on the through the tunnel. And, you know, there have been some discussions, some suggestions that might happen with, I think it's Renfe or RENFE, the Spanish company, but nothing has eventuated with that yet.
Yeah, and I guess for anyone traveling by train to the Alps, you could go to Lille and change in Lille rather than Paris. Is that a route that you've taken before, Ian, rather than going through from changing railway stations in
Yeah,
Paris?
sometimes. I mean, if you were, it's not one I've done, but if you were going to, for example,
Okay.
sometimes it's better to do that, depending on the timings that you're traveling, because actually, instead of in Paris where you have to change stations and go across the town, in Lille you can just change platforms, for example. And so for Clues, taking you into the Port du Soleil, that can actually be a better connection.
So to Clues, you can go to Lille and change and get a direct train to Clues. Is that correct, from Lille?
I'm going to say yes. I'd probably have to double check that. Maybe that was a discussion with something that Montagne are looking at as to where, because I know that there is nothing confirmed in this respect, but I know that they are looking at the possibilities of putting on a charter train. That would be it, from Lille to Clues. That's how that's come into mind.
Right. And
so that would affect people coming into the area from the Netherlands, Belgium, France, etc. But also that's how you connect from the UK.
Right. And Alison's also followed up saying, the passport check issue is massive for groups, and they experienced 12 to 18 hour delays for coach groups from Dover to Calais, which is obviously, not a great incentive for groups to travel by coach, and for coach companies as well to provide travel. But also Alison's making the point that the carbon footprint of a coach journey, presumably when it's with a certain amount of people, but probably even half full, is considerably less. The carbon footprint is considerably less than flying, if you take the coach as well. So it's worth bearing that in mind, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's absolutely right. And I noticed in James's presentation yesterday, he broke down, flying, driving, train, and other. As far as I can see, the only other possible can be coach travel. So that other category was about 2 or 3%, something like that, which would be people traveling by coach. And I agree with you, Alison, that outside of the issue to do with global warming, the political situation, which means that currently individuals have to have their passports checked, is making coach travel much more difficult.
Yeah, coach is interesting, and obviously costs have gone up a little bit for coach operators as well, which can be, if people are making decisions whether they take a coach or a flight, that can obviously affect their decision-making process. The coach traditionally is good value for money. I think it still is when you look at what it wraps up and what it includes, and you can obviously go direct to resort. You often don't have to do a secondary transfer. So value for money, it's still probably a cheap alternative.
Yeah, I mean, there are secondary issues or tertiary issues beyond the climate change side of things, as Alison refers to politically, but also we all know that it's very important for us for school children to be able to experience skiing, because we want to have younger entrants to the market, and for many people this is the first opportunity they get to experience skiing or snowboarding, and therefore it's important to try and make that process as smooth as possible and to remove any disincentives. And when people read about or hear about coaches being stuck, there was a school from Brighton who actually they turned around, gave up and came back, and they didn't go on their holiday at all. I mean, that's terrible word of mouth. That sort of thing we really want to avoid if possible.
And James Gambrell is asking whether electric coaches exist.
Well, that is a very interesting question. It's that technology is progressing, and there are larger electric vehicles, but they're very minimal at the moment.
Yeah, but clearly that could be an opportunity in the future, right? To get numbers, because I guess with a railway track, the train is fantastic, but a railway track is limited by the fact that it is one track. Whereas if we could get electric vehicles of a certain size on the roads, then it would increase capacity significantly, right?
For sure, all options that reduce carbon emissions, and we know that within the UK and the EU that current legislation says that there will be no new internal combustion engine vehicles from 2030, 2035 onwards. So that technology is progressing very quickly, partly because it's been legislated for. Motor manufacturers have a remit that they have to ensure that a certain proportion of their vehicles are electric, have electric motors, and that proportion is increasing and increasing over the next 10 years.
So just bringing this back to almost the start of your talk, Ian, you know, and actually the message that you brought consistently through the talk, individually cutting our own carbon emissions by 6% a year will basically help to achieve the target of net zero by 2050, right? Is there some kind of online calculator where we can go and we can put in what activities we are doing right now, and we can see what our carbon footprint is for, we get on a plane, we get in our car, we do this, we put in the amount of mileage we do every year, and then we can actually look at shaving those percentages down so that we can monitor our own carbon footprint really easily and go, you know what, I've hit my target this year. I'm 10% lower this year with my carbon footprint. And if there isn't, why? And because for me, I think maybe it's just the way my brain works, but I'd be like, you know what, I could stick that data in and I could monitor it, and I could have an app on my phone and I just put it in and, oh, you know what, I've shaved 1% off this month or whatever, however it works. And maybe there's an incentive to do that or not. I don't know. I don't think you need an incentive other than the fact that you're doing the right thing. Yeah. Does that exist?
Yeah, loads of them exist. I mean, it all depends what kind of level of depth you want to go into. Some of them will kind of give you a broad summary. Some of them will ask you, you know, how many kilowatt hours of electricity you use on a monthly basis. And depending on that level of detail that you want to input, it will produce a result for you. And I would say it's a consistency thing. I mean, one of the points I was trying to make is that when we look at the big picture, it seems impossible. How are we going to be able to achieve this incredibly big thing? But if we break it down into the smaller components and look at it like that, then we understand that it can be achievable. So whatever your starting point is, however basic is, I'm taking 6 flights a year this year, I'm going to take 5 next year, I'm taking 10 this year, I'm going to take 9 this year, or that's a simple way, or looking into it and working out what the carbon emissions are of your household and then looking to cut them down, and that's more achievable as well. I mean, I only touched on vegan vegetarianism briefly within that conversation, but from a household point of view, eating less meat can make a significant difference. And that's, I live in a household where 50% of us are vegetarian, and as a consequence, the other 50% end up eating vegetarian reasonably often. So it's, it helps to bring it down as a household quite quickly, immediately.
So I presume, Ian, that you don't need to cut your emissions by 6% every year now, because you've already cut your emissions to a point where you will be contributing to that net zero by 2050.
Well, not really. I mean, that's not
okay.
The point is that 6% is an average, across everyone. And like I've already said, like I'm flying to Australia. I feel like I wish there was another way of doing it, but there isn't.
Okay, but...
I took a short haul flight in February. That was like a rolled over press trip that I had arranged from pre-pandemic. In an ideal world, I wouldn't take any short haul flights at all. I'm doing a race in France in next month. And I have actually worked out a way of doing it where I'm going to go out there by train, but really complicated because I need a bike to do it. to work out how to get that bike. It'd be so easy to whack that bike on a plane and take it out with me. So anyway, in answer to your question, no, absolutely not. The goal as a household is to continue to reduce our emissions. But, I think that, everybody understands that in the modern world, you're going to create emissions because we live, and part of that on a daily basis involves creating emissions. It's like, how can you do that more efficiently?
Okay. And just lastly from me, I think, going back to the Vallée Blanche, I had very similar experience to you, Ian. I first skied on the Vallée Blanche in the very early 90s, and obviously I went there last time, I think last summer or the summer before, and obviously there is this huge contrast. It's not just Vallée Blanche. We as skiers and people that go to the mountains, I think we see the effects of climate change as much, well, more than many other people, let's say. But there are still people that are, what's the word I should use? There are skeptics. There are people that don't see that and don't understand that, or there's also people that do understand that and kind of blame the ski industry is getting hit quite hard with a sort of, it's your fault sort of kind of thing, a little bit. And what in terms of the messaging on that, have you got any thoughts about, first of all, how we can, on both sides, how we can say, actually, we know this is happening and this is real and this is affecting us as an industry, but at the same time we're also doing what we can to make it better because it's kind of in our interest to do that. But also it's not necessarily our fault. I mean, obviously traveling by plane to go somewhere is adding to your carbon emissions, but once you're there, and you're having your holiday, is that ski holiday any worse, shall I say, I'm going to use that word, than going on a summer holiday, say to Greece, and sitting by a swimming pool that's being all the stuff that goes on around a resort, for example? There's about
well, I mean, that
questions there in one, isn't there?
That question in itself could be a whole panel for discussion. A topic for discussion on a panel. It's a broader issue. I found it very interesting that if you saw Laurent Vanat do his presentation, his annual report on skiing, and one of the issues or the challenges for skiing he referred to was what he called ski bashing. And I think that's what you're alluding to there. People saying, well, why should you go skiing? In the first place, you're destroying that environment. It serves you right. And evidently, if you do fly, then there's a significant output. But not everybody does fly. In this country, quite a lot of people fly. In Europe, all of these issues that we're talking about trying to get people to go by low carbon travel, train travel is being promoted, car sharing is being promoted. They're very focused on how they can reduce emissions. And when you get to resort itself, the same principle applies. The actual proportion of the carbon cost of the holiday from travel isn't as high if you're not flying, but actually on the ground, I mentioned in terms of Compagnie des Alpes, how the cost of running a ski resort, the carbon cost of running a ski resort, so much of that comes from the piste bashers themselves, because they can't be run by electricity. There are electric snow groomers, to go into that particular issue now. However, the lifts themselves are often run by renewables, because they're powered by hydro in a lot of cases in alpine areas. That's how they're drawing their electricity. And you've got cases like Chevalier, where they've also got a lot of solar and wind power, or Les Arcs, where they lots of resorts have solar now. or they might be a case like Anzère in Switzerland, where they're using biomass to create heat, etc. So the carbon costs of the actual holiday itself aren't so high. And I wish I could like pull out this survey off the top of my head, but I did read something more recently that was saying that if you do compare the actual cost of the holiday itself, the carbon cost of the holiday itself, with that beach holiday that you're talking about, or something that's in a big hotel with lots of aircon, etc., then they are relatively equivalent.
Yeah, sure. Okay, Ian, thank you. I don't think there's any other questions from anyone here. If there are, maybe you still got a few seconds to add something in there before we
I mean, not really. I mean, great to see that lots of people have attended, and there's interest there, and we'll see what kind of summer we get, but we see how ideas develop, and look forward to expanding on these ideas and talking to people when we come to Listex and National Snow Week in October.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ian. I will just very quickly again remind people that at 1:30 this afternoon, I'm presenting the results of the summer alpine survey, summer mountain survey, at 1:30. So hopefully see you there. Thanks very much to Ian for that presentation.
No problem.
Really
Thank you, Rob.
As always. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.